I've made over 25,000 sales calls and turned a 12% meeting rate into a 55% plus meeting rate with these strategies. So here are my tips to help you increase your approaching conversion.
Sales is a transference of feeling. I think people forget this sometimes. Sales is a transference of feeling. So if we're just going big picture, sales is emotion, okay? So I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial, but it's totally true. Every decision anyone makes, whether they say it's logical or not, it's always emotional. Even if it makes total sense. It's always emotional. There's a feeling behind the reason you're purchasing something, whether it's a rental property, the house, selling their house, whatever it is, it's always emotional. The reasons people decide to work with someone is simply these two things. They have a need for whatever you do, right? Trying to sell, buy the house, and they trust you. And if they don't trust you, they don't work with you, they look for someone else. So your whole goal, right, when someone reaches out to you or you reach out to someone and they're trying to sell or list, is to build trust. Agreed? Yes. Yes, that's the entire point of what we're going to go over. And there's a way to build trust that's quick and efficient and it's powerful, and you build this really strong relationship with people, and there's this way to do it that takes a while, frustrates people, frustrates yourself, and you're getting all these objections, right? And people not following through or saying they're going to work with you, then they don't, and all the different things. And you heard a million of them when you knock on people's doors, let me tell you. There's unlimited objections of why people can say no, right? What I want to do is I want to reframe sales from what we normally think of it, this is sort of like maybe slimy thing, to think of it more like dating, okay, for a second. Okay, so everybody in here can actually understand sales better than they used to just by thinking of it in dating, okay? So there's a thing called the cycle of the sale. There's these moments that we go through. But think about dating for a second, right? So I just use a random bar example, okay? If a guy goes up to a girl at a bar to hit on him or whatever, right? And he said, hey, do you want to marry me? First question. What happens?
She's out.
No, this is weird. I don't even know who you are. I don't even know your name, right? That's weird, but often salespeople do that. Hey, can I have the sale right now? I don't know anything about you. Does that make sense? And that doesn't work, right? So there's no reason to do it that way. Okay, a better approach would be more like, hey, what's your name? Can I get you a drink or whatever, right? Start a conversation. If the conversation goes well, might be some check boxes that maybe she gives the phone number. And then there's follow-up, right? There's a phone call. But if that phone call goes badly, there's no first date, right? And if the first date goes badly, there's definitely no second date. Right? Kind of tracking with me? Okay. So now, we all get that. That's what you do as salespeople. That's it. You're dating somebody. You're dating them, right? And so obviously when we're dating them, there's certain things that we look for. And that's what your prospect's looking for in you. It's the exact same concept, okay? How can we make that better? How can we make it better? Now you guys all get referrals in here, I'm assuming, right? You all love the referrals. Why do the referrals work better? Right? Well, think about in the dating scenario. Hey, Sue, I know your friend Lily. She said you're cool. We have something in common that I already know. And therefore, how much more likely is Sue in this scenario going to give the guy the phone number because of the connection with Lily? That's why it works, right? It's all that trust. Before we go into this, right, which is essentially the framework for developing a sales script or a sales process and how to improve it, right, and make it better, we want to frame everything in the mindset that we're going to sell the way people like to buy. So in order to build this and go through each concept, we have to understand human nature and how people make decisions. Because everyone has a personality, we tend to sell like a certain type of personality, and it attracts a certain type of personality. And often these are called decision-making styles. There's 4 main decision-making styles, which means if you only work with personality, you're only selling to about 25% of people. Okay, and really good sales presentations and processes appeal to all 100% of people. When you get really good at sales, you can identify someone from the first question they ask, how they look, how they dress, and you can understand the reason that they're not going to buy and what they're looking for in order to feel comfortable with you. Okay, so before we go through all the application, the technical stuff, we really need to understand these 4 decision-making styles, okay? These 4 are fighters, entertainers, detectives, and counselors. And if you ever had a disc, you know, the driver's a fighter, the influencer's an entertainer. People have different names for them, but I like these 4. If you want to go deeper into this, there's a good book called Navigate 2.0 by Dustin Hillis. He was the record holder at the company I worked at. He made like $105,000 in 12 weeks as a junior in college. He's just insanely good at sales. Dustin Hillis, Navigate 2.0. I love that book. That's where I got a lot of this portion of the talk from. So, talking about fighters, right? You guys, and you're going to have memories come up, and I encourage you to start thinking about people who act like this. You ever call someone, cold call, warm call, whoever, they're like, what do you want? It's a fighter. They're straight to the point. Their first question is always what, okay? And you can tell by looking at them, right? So verbally you can hear what, but if you see these lines right here on me, those are called freight train concentration lines. I see a couple of them out there. And you know you're a fighter, aren't you? You're straight to the point, okay? So when a walker would answer the door, I would knock and they would answer the door, and I saw these lines, I'd just cut out all the fluff, and they'd love me for it. And they would talk to me. It's the same thing when you hear that question, what? Get to the point. What? You've got to approach it a certain way if you want to close that person, right? Okay? So the reason they're asking what is they like to be in control. They like to be in control. Their biggest fear is not being in control, right? And so the way that you sell this person in all these different steps that we're going to go over here in a few minutes, right, is to allow them to be in the driver's seat, right? For some people that's easy, but if you're a driver, it's kind of hard. You actually have to sit back, right? There's some strategies emotionally. If you are a driver selling to another driver, that you need to lean in your chair. Or conversely, you're so good at being to the point that these other three get really rubbed wrong, right, by the way that you're selling. Does that make sense? Okay. So biggest things to write down on this is that they're quick decision makers. They ask the word what. If you hear what, you are talking to a fighter. Okay, you need to change immediately. Get to the point, and it needs to be just confidently true, and here's the value. They struggle with having fun and relaxing. See a couple smiles out there. I'm a fighter, I get it. I'm a workaholic sometimes, right? So they love an easy process, right? So if your process isn't like, I'm not going to buy from you because I'm just like, it sounds like I have to do work. If I'm a fighter trying to buy something from you, my goal is that you do all the work for me, or I'm not working for you. I'm going to find someone who's going to do the work. Does that make sense? Our entertainers, okay, there's lots and lots and lots of realtors who are entertainers, or influencers, as most people call them. Visually, you can tell an entertainer by their cheeks, because they smile more. They have more fun versus the fighter, right? They smile more. So you got the cheeks. I can see a few of you out there that are totally entertainers just by the way that you're smiling. These are people who really like to get to know people. They're also easily distractible. I have a team meeting I'm going to go to on Monday for Aaron Cooper, who's Keller Williams' agent and got a team called the Cooper Group. And they're all entertainers. They're all influencers. And a meeting that's normally going to take her 4 hours, we're going to try to do in an hour and a half together, which is why you need to, right? Okay, so the influencer always asks who. So if you actually look at the best sales processes, right, the ones that are the best not only are very clear and structured for the fighter, right, but they also have a portion that's names. And if you get anything out of this, forget everything else, just write down names or power. Names are everything. Names are literally everything. Regardless of who it is, a name builds trust. A name builds trust. And I work with so many realtors, and as far as I can tell, they're not getting reviews. They don't have a names list. We used to call them a names list, where we have every client on a list somewhere that we could just hand to someone or show, or have a album of pictures, which in my sales presentation, which Vernon has gone through, for example, there's a whole slide of all the people, and we go through and we pick out who you know, right? And why? Because when an entertainer sees their friend, they're ready to buy. Because their friend's bought. You must be good. It's immediate. Right? Does that make sense? So who? They ask who? Entertainer. Who? Who is good? They're quick decision makers. Okay? So they're not going to go through a lengthy process. If you don't get to know them, they won't like you. So if you do the fighter approach, the fighter introduction, some of these words we'll go over in a second, right, to an entertainer, they start to go like this, and they become interested. You need to be interested in their life. The entertainer's presentation, instead of being 30 minutes, might be 40. It's going to be a little longer. Okay? But don't make it 2 hours, because they get distracted. Biggest fear, social rejection. So always make them feel good. Third one, detectives. So we usually have a primary decision-making style, and then we usually have a secondary. My secondary is the detective, the more analytical side of things. Detectives are numbers and data based. So if you work with a lot of investors, you're probably a detective because you get the numbers, right? And if you have a presentation that shows numbers, you're appealing to, go ahead, you're welcome. You're appealing to detectives, okay? So these detectives, if it's not proof, if there's no proof, they're not going to buy from you. they're not going to buy, which is why it's so important to track your success of your clients and when they sell or buy and all the different things and all the numbers, how long it normally takes to close a deal. Hopefully you have CRMs that track if someone works with you, what's the average close rate. Like these numbers, even if they're not like where you'd like them to be, if I see that, I'm like, sweet, this person's being honest. You can't fake numbers. You can't fake numbers. Sweet. I don't get fluffed. Perfect. I understand that there's going to be this expected result that may or may not be somewhere in this range. Does that kind of make sense? So it builds the trust with them. So their first question is why. So if you're talking to someone, they're like, why this? Why that? Why? That is the detective. You all have friends probably too, right? These detectives, and they have these big overarching themes and ideas they like to talk about, right? Biggest weakness for these people is they overthink it. So you need to take any reason to overthink it out or they procrastinate. Because they're slow decision makers. If it's not 100% the right choice, their biggest fear is making the wrong choice. So if there's a 1% chance it's the wrong choice, they're probably going to procrastinate until you offer the 1%. So a lot of people ask, like right now, it's like there's this, the loans are so high and how's this work? And people kind of get struggling with like closing people on selling their house or buying or whatever it is, right? Like one solution is like, can you teach them, right? Because we know about different loans, right? And we understand that there's loan officers that can, do a refinance when the rates come down, right? Can we model out that process for that person so they buy now at a high rate, then in a couple of years, the good chance they could come down? So if it makes sense, does it make sense? It's more of a math problem. And just doing the math for them so they can see it and giving them the things. So visual cues, I'm a perfect example today. Okay, they're either kind of slobby, which is the disorganized sort of analytical, or like everything's in the right place. And so you can tell literally just from that. If you go to my desk though, it's kind of slobby. The way I dress, I like to have it kind of put together. My brother's like that too. He's analytical. He's a detective and he's an engineering major. Okay, last but not least. Now counselors are the trickiest ones to work with, but once you start working with them, they will be with you for a decade. Okay, so there's a lot of value in getting counselors to want to work with you or recruit and all these different things. These all translate to different parts of business. But this person is long-term relationship based. They are a slow decision maker. They're somebody who really believes in loyalty, okay? And they don't just trust people. My wife is a perfect example of a counselor. She has these certain friends that she's just loyal to a fault for, and getting her to trust you is just like, she's like recounting all of the things where you didn't call or text, right? If someone's smiling, maybe you're a counselor. She's remembering all the moments that they showed up, if they were somebody who's one of her loyal friends, right? And so the first question of these people is like, how does it work? How do I make this, how? Like they struggle with this idea of change, right? Because they're loyal. This person, really good. I can trust this person. I don't have to change anything. This is my person, because their biggest fear is change. Right? So you need to make it super clear of what's going to happen in your sales presentation. If you were to add extra slides or a few slides, either for the specific person or just in general to have it very clear, again, process of what's going to happen, how things work, right? Maybe a little one sheet explaining all the steps, this person would be a lot happier. And this is a person where you do have to follow up with a lot and just keep them in your mind and call or text them or whatever until they get to the point where they trust you, and then they work with you and then they come back to you because they trust you and they don't want change, right? And that's a great client to have, isn't it? I don't want to change. I'm working with you, Karen, for the rest of my life, please. I don't want to look for anybody else. Karen's my gal. So visual cues, this is actually really funny. Sometimes they have a little crinkle looking in part of their ears, which is bizarre to me, but you can kind of see it, which is very interesting. Not every single person, but yeah, it's interesting, yeah. So there you go. Freight train, concentration lines, rosy cheeks for the entertainers, right? Kind of just calculated for the detective, little crinkle ears for the counselor. Okay, so we have this in mind, right? So this is how we're going to build our entire sales process.
Guys, and if you're watching this video and you're somebody who wants to scale your business, you've got a team, you're not sure how to get there, or you're hitting a plateau, you're the exact person that we want to work with. We've helped businesses grow their top line revenue by up to 250%. We've helped other businesses grow their gross profit margin by up to 1,000%. Guys, we can help you get to where you want to go. All you have to do is jump on a quick 15 to 30 minute phone call or Google Meet with us so we can learn about your business to see how we might be able to help you do the exact same thing. So click the link in the description or go to knowledgegapconsulting.com and book a discovery call today.
Want to appeal to all 4 people. If you're not appealing to all 4 people, you're cutting some people out who would otherwise buy from you. Okay, so I'd like for them to buy from you, yeah? So exercise real quick. So I want you to go ahead and identify, right? It's not about what you know, it's about what you apply, right? So we're going to take 2 minutes. I want you to identify if you currently appeal to the 4 buying styles, okay? Do you currently appeal to all 4? If not, write down who you do appeal to and write down a little task list, maybe 3 or 4 things that you should add to your sales presentation. And if you don't have a PowerPoint for your sales presentation or something, you should have one. We're all visual beings now with social media and online, so you need to, if you want to get to the next level and speed this up, otherwise, instead of spending 2 hours talking to someone to get them to like you, you can do it in 19 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes to where they're like really sold on what you have to offer and they get your value. So write that down, 2 minutes real quick. What information about you and your process could you add to appeal to each of the different buying styles? So do you have them all your detectives on a names list and then all your fighters? And then could you even break it down like that to where someone asks you an analytical question? You were like, well, these 3 people here, actually, you know what they really understood and liked, which we'll talk about answering objections, because they might know those people, because we kind of tend to find our little tribes, right? You know, they had the same idea, that they had the same question, and this is actually what they thought, and here's the solution. I used to work accounting, you know, and people would know each other from, if you're from Etowah, right, you probably know everybody there. I'd have a list of all my Etowah people. And then I'd be like, yeah, I've worked with these people. I'd ask, hey, where are you from? They say Etowah. I was like, oh my gosh, I know all your friends. And they'd be immediately trusting, and I don't have to waste time telling my life story to get them to like me. Does that make sense? So that's what I would do. You can do by location, you can do by decision-making style. It depends on how far and abroad you've gone. But by the end of the summer, I'd have so many cousins, uncles, brothers, sisters, just like, oh, you're the bookman. They'd recognize me at the door, you know, because I was posting on Facebook, and they were all, again, one county. Now, real estate, obviously, you can't do everyone in one county. Sometimes you're just taking what you get, but you always are tracking who bought, where are they from, who might they know, how did they think, what type of testimonial, what did they say when the reason they bought, which again, we're going to talk about today, about how to like gather a lot of that information. It's called phishing a little bit, not like online stealing email phishing, but like phishing for the right testimonial that answers objections, okay? All right, moving on. So now we're going to actually put this into practice. So we understand we have some weak points, we have some things that we relate to, and now we're going to make some changes to the different parts of the presentation, okay? So we're going to talk about this thing called the introduction. Now, I'm just specifically talking about the sales meeting, okay? When someone comes in for a buyer consult or a listing consult or something like that, because, you know, there's a million situations, but every time you're either on the phone with someone, approaching, you know, a lot of these concepts roll over, and there's just so many ways to sell real estate that there's just no one solution. So we're just going to say you're talking to someone at their house or doing a listing consult or you're doing a buying consult, okay? Just to get our brains in the right place. Does that sound good with everybody? Okay, perfect. So the introduction is from the moment you sit down with someone or walking through their house or whatever to the moment you start to show a lot of information of how the process works is the demonstration, okay? That's when that starts. The price buildup is essentially when you're justifying your value or commission, right? A lot of times you're justifying the 3% or 2%, right? That's what we call the price build. The close, okay, is when you're basically bringing people to a decision, and this is when they start giving you these objections, right? There's, oh, I'm not sure, and procrastinating, or like, what about this? What if the market's shit? Whatever, right? Those are objections in closing. The contract, or what we used to call cash collection, that's where you've collected the sale, essentially. And the sale in this sense isn't the sale of the house and all of the paperwork that goes through that. It's the sale of you working with you're making, right? The rest of the stuff, that's all pretty. You go show them some houses, you find the stuff, you know, you got to do obviously some legwork and things like that to find the right ones. And, you know, there's a whole 3 workshops I'm sure we could do on all of that stuff. But just in general, getting them to say, I want to work with you, Elizabeth. I'm working with you today, right? That's really what we need. If we have that, everything else is pretty good after that, correct? Yes, that's what we're talking about, okay? The solidification is how you make sure they don't cancel on you. If you ever had somebody back out, it doesn't feel good. And then the marketing piece is just something that you should always be doing to warm up the next one, keeping track of your names and different things like that. Does that sound good? Something not on the list, but something you should always do, and you probably do, I hope. If you don't do this, okay. Before you go to a meeting, you should always have this thing called a warm-up email, okay? I don't know if you do this or not, but if you don't, this is something you should add. It makes a massive difference. So a warm-up email, what it is basically, here's who I am, here's my purpose, here's why I do what I do, and here's my experience. Before you walk in, why is this valuable? Right? Well, if time is money, and time is leading to more sales or not. If you waste time, you get less sales, and if you have more time to sell, you'll sell more, right? Well, if I can get them to think I'm amazing before I even walk in the door, I'm not even selling it. I don't got to hardly sell myself, right? Hey, did you see the email? What'd you think? They're like, Joe, you're incredible. I loved it. I looked over all of it. I know what they know about me, so I don't have to figure out what they don't know, right? Does that kind of make sense? So what I would always have in here, and I have it for every single person I send to you, and some people don't read this, okay? So you don't want to come in there expecting everyone to read it. Some people miss it. The general idea is that you're excited to meet them. You know, like every email, you should have some specific little characteristics of your conversation. You want to have, again, the bio, the background of you, purpose, and values. For me, I have that all on a couple pages on my website, joeignace.com/bio, joeignace.com/purpose and values, to where they're really getting the whole scope of my business and what I do. If anybody, books a meeting with me, you'll get this email as an example. I always remind them of where we're meeting and all that kind of stuff. When you have this, it helps people not cancel on the meeting. I don't know if you have a problem with that, but people cancel sometimes, so how can we get 100% show rate? That's the goal of this email. And how can we get the 2-hour conversation, the hour conversation into 35 minutes so I can go on to the next thing? That's kind of the idea, okay? So then you walk in the door, okay, and this is where the sale is made, the introduction. Okay, when you walk in and you're sitting down, you're having a conversation. Before you go over commissions, before you go over your process of how you help people be successful, they've decided they are working with you or they are not based on the initial conversation and how you're connecting with them, right? If they don't trust you, right, they're not going to work with you. They're meeting with you because they have a need. You know they have a need. So now the idea is how can we get them to trust me and how can I show them that I will solve their need better than other people, right? So 5 parts of a really good introduction, which could be anywhere from 7 to 15 minutes, just depending on how quick you go, the shorter the better. You're going to start by building rapport. Building rapport is building trust. It's asking some questions. We're going to go over the 5 levels of connection for rapport in a second. The second part, which we're going to talk about in a couple slides, more detail, is called setting the table. It's where you set expectations. If you ever have anybody interrupt you in a sales meeting and they're asking you all these questions, or they're derailing you, or it ends up 2 hours because they're going all over the place, is because you don't set the table. Questions is how you get someone to really open up. So not only do you know what service to provide, but you know what needs to cover in the next section, which is called your 3 main reasons, or the idea behind working with you, what you do. And you're actually able to cover objections here. Objections just being, I'm not sure if I should buy yet based on the information. So it doesn't mean a no, it just means I'm not sure yet. Okay, so you're actually able to cover objections, and we used to have this rule of thumb. If you come up with, whoever says the objection first wins. So if someone says, well, what about the market? But if you said it first, it brings trust. If they say it first, it becomes an argument a lot of times. Does that make sense? Because you know better, and they don't know better, but they're now asking because it wasn't covered. Does that kind of make sense? So the best place to hit an objection is actually in the introduction here. The buying atmosphere sets up the decision, so that way at the end of the meeting, they're expecting to decide to work with you or not. And if you're really, really good at it, okay, you can actually get people to be really excited about that and not feel weird about it instead of procrastinating over and over. You have some detectives and some counselors who will not make a decision no matter what you do, so you'll still have to do some follow-up with some people, okay? And that happens sometimes, and that's okay. All right, so building rapport. So there's a thing called the 5 levels of connection that I really want you to understand. I talk about this with every single person that I've worked with, is essentially how do we get someone to like us and to trust us in less time. When I do phone call scripts and I'm writing those for people, how to get referrals better, how to approach a new client better, our goal is to get to the first 3 within like 30 seconds, 40 seconds on the call. And then we want to get there within 5 minutes when we're sitting down at a listing presentation. Why do we connect with people, right? Have you ever thought about like why do we sort of like someone, not like someone? How does this person really get me to enjoy spending time with them? Well, our brains are really naturally wired to connect based on past experiences and future goals. And so this first way of connection that people need to have in order to get to the next layer of observation is called location. So if you were in China and you were just walking around seeing some sights and you saw a University of Tennessee Vols sweatshirt someone was wearing, what would you go and talk to that person about?
Tennessee.
I'm from Knoxville. I went to school there, right? Or like, I've lived really 10 minutes from campus. What are you doing here? You'd connect on the places you've been. When somebody says, hey, we're going to Niagara Falls, if you've been, what do you say? I've been there. It's such a beautiful place. Why are you going? And so we connect on places. Oh, you're from Etowah? I'm from Etowah. Right? So the first question I always ask people is, where are you from? I did it with everybody here. Got a good idea. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Because I understand now probably how you will think a little bit. I can make some conjectures. Like, oh, you moved here to here to here. You're newer. Okay. Right? Then observation. Okay. So locations. Just If we've been in the same place, there's just this natural, oh, I get it. We have memories that we can sort of connect on, okay? The second one's the observations, where we know about the same things within the same sphere. So just using a simple football example, right? If I know a lot about Hendon Hooker and the Tennessee Vols, and I'm talking to James here about how the season's coming up next season, I'm talking about all these little intricate things that only Vols fans would know, we're closer. Right? When you're talking to your real estate friends, one of the reasons you might enjoy some people is that they know a lot of things and you know a lot of things and you're kind of on the same level. Make sense? On the same page. You're observing the same thing. So when we're selling books, we used to know everything about the school. We know about which teachers were which and their names and what they taught and if they gave homework or not. So if I had a 6th grader who bought 2 weeks ago, he'd tell me a story about the teacher. I'd intentionally fish or ask for the story about the teacher and the name and what they taught and all that stuff. And if I got a 5th grader that was going into 6th grade, I'd be like, oh, you got Miss Horn, huh? Yeah, she gives a lot of homework. And then they would be like, oh my gosh, this guy's an expert. Because I knew what was happening in their community. Does that kind of make sense? So that's observation, okay? Third one is destination. This is based on goals, right? So we usually self-sort ourselves into these clubs or tribes or groups of people who want to go to the same place. Hence real estate, if you think about real estate solutions or wherever brokerage you have been or whatever, right? You went there because they had a similar mission. Right? You have a similar mission. And this, if you can get to this in a presentation, and you have the same mission as the person sitting next to you, they will work with you. But a lot of times people aren't saying their mission, their why, their values, and why they're doing what they're doing. And it's really healthy to say those things. It's really different, okay? If my goal is to build residual wealth, and maybe I'm an investor, right? And the goal is to not have a job in 5 years, if that's also your goal and what you try to do for your clients, you've now differentiated yourself, and I know that you know and have my best interests at heart. Let's go. I'm working with you. Let's go. That's, oh, sweet. Same language. I get this. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. Now, these other two we're going to talk about. This is just for like maybe talking to clients later, working with people for a long time. You're not going to get here on the sales presentation, okay? Because it just takes time to build relationship, like actual deep relationship. So the fourth one, though, is perspiration, okay? Perspiring, like running with someone, right? If you were to go run and do a CrossFit Games with Billy over here, if we did that together, we would get it. We'd be better friends just because we did a hard thing. Does that kind of make sense? Like everyone who sold books door to door understands how difficult it is to do. And so any alumni you meet, like, oh, you're a book guy, and they'll hire you on the spot because they understand what you've gone through. So for your clients, if you work with them for a long time, they've had good experience, you're essentially perspiring together, right? And then they'll stick with you longer, right? Does that kind of make sense? So repeat clients, perspiration, all that kind of stuff. Last one's conversation, where there's no facades. We usually have a handful of people on this level, but that's where you can just be yourself and you don't have to worry about anything. Everybody's got some friends like that. And you may even have a client like that, where you don't have to like do all the salesy stuff or like be professional and all that kind of stuff. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, so that's building rapport. Where are you from? And connecting on some sort of thing that we agree on, and then giving your why, okay? So setting the table. So after we've done this, we get to this place. A lot of times I'm showing the names when I'm building rapport as well. Like, oh, you're from here? You know all of these people, okay? That's the quick way of doing rapport. That's what I would suggest doing. Oh, you're probably like these guys. You probably have these same goals. That's, boom. Does it make sense? Okay. But setting the table is what people skip a lot, okay? It helps you not get derailed, and you'll have a shorter meeting. Okay, awesome. Karen, wow, we have so much in common. I literally could talk to you all day long, but I tell you what, I know you're busy. I know your time's valuable, and I want to value your time. This is how you get someone to stop talking, okay? I value you. You make it about them, okay? I'll tell you what, though. Let me just run through what we're going to go through in the meeting so that we can get this done, and that way we can get you on to your next thing. Does that sound okay? Okay, sweet. And then you're going to set the table, and this is how you set the table. So, okay, Karen, what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay with you, to understand your situation. And based on your situation, there's different things that I do for different people because I'm very personalized. I always like to say I'm like a concierge type service. That word is just it's a great buzzword that people just, oh, concierge, they're going to do whatever it takes, okay? I'm kind of like concierge service. So from that, I'll basically go over the idea of how I help people reach their goals. And if that all sounds pretty cool, then we can go through and I'll walk you through the exact process of what it looks like working with me. And then if that goes well and you're pretty excited, and I always use the word vibing, even though I have some clients who are 40s, 50s, 60s, because they always just smile. Be funny, make money. That's how okay, so you like that? There you go. Be funny, make money. Vibing, right? So if we're vibing and things are going well, then I can run through, like the buyer's contract. So I'm letting them know there might be a piece of paper, or the listing contract. I'm letting them know there's going to be a piece of paper. If things are working well, we can walk you through that and get started, reaching etc. goal. If not, no big deal. And that's called a mini buying atmosphere. We're just letting people off the hook. It's like, yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter either way. No pressure. Okay? Sometimes the whole goal of being a good salesperson is to just get out of the way. Not be the reason someone doesn't buy. Because again, they have a need, right? The less sales you are, the better. So if you do it like that, they're like, okay, questions. Okay, they're going to explain how they're going to help. Okay, they're going to show me how to help. Okay, and then we're going to make a decision. Okay, sweet. And they wait. And then you talk and you do your thing and you ask the questions, and they're very excited to give you the questions because they understand what the questions are for. They're not distrusting the questions or confused about where they're going. Does that make sense? And the questions reveal their pain points. Okay, so reasons people work with you is because we could list a myriad of reasons, but the idea is that they've had a bad experience with someone else. They don't want this to happen again. They haven't had an experience, so they want a good one, right? Or they have a certain experience they're looking for. So when you're asking questions, you're just trying to figure out which bucket they're in, and you're trying to figure out which specific details and pain points that you need to offer and provide in order for them to want to work with you, right? And then obviously you need to follow through on those, especially if they're a little different than what you normally do. And I always take notes at this part of it, okay? So there's two types of questions. You have logical questions. What's the size of your house? What's the price? What's your timeline? As a realtor, this tells you all the things you kind of need to know about what you might do, etc. Are you listing? Are you buying? Where are you from? Moving? All that stuff, okay? Emotional questions are more like fears, goals, vision. Why? Vernon, why do you want to sell your house? Why does that matter to you a lot? How do you want the process to go? Why do you want the timeline to be 1 month? Why? And those why questions will get people to really open up to you about their situation. And I kid you not, if you ask them good enough, and this is not the goal, of course, but you might have people kind of tearing up. Remember, sales is a transference of feeling, right? They have a desire. They have a desire for this to go well. Buying the house is stressful. Selling the house is stressful. Wealth, money, stressful stuff. So you want them to confide in you. They confide in you, you see that emotion. It's essentially your green light to go to the next step because you understand their situation. Does that kind of make sense? Whether they're excited, frustrated, whatever. You see emotion, next step. You don't have to ask 12 more questions, okay? Okay, so then you're basically going over the idea, or what we used to call 3 main reasons. We have these few reasons, essentially, of why you should work with me, or why this makes sense. Sometimes it would be like, something almost as cheesy as, hey, like, why is it important to you that your kids, we sold educational resources, go to college? Why is education important to you for the kids? And I would just let them tell me why it was. It's like, yeah, right? It's like a reason they ought to invest in education is they care about it, for example. Sometimes for different investors, right? The reason they're going to invest is going to be different than a first-time home buyer, right? So your reasons will change based on the person. First-time home buyer is more like, hey, I think what everyone's been telling me is their first times, they want to just make sure that they don't have all these issues coming up later. So what I do for you is I set up an inspection and an inspector, whatever, right? You have this person. Does that make sense? It's different for everybody based on your relationships, okay? So I can't just give you, here's the perfect script. It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it more than anything. But you want to have those solutions. I think the second solution was always like, yeah, and everyone's been telling me the same thing as you, is that, man, as the kids get older, that's what we say in the educational space, as kids get older, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, whatever grade they had, man, the math starts getting weird. And they would do exactly what Elizabeth just did. Because I knew that was their problem. Man, math starts getting weird. And then they just start exploding with emotion about how they hate the math. Right? They hate it. Right? And you get that, and it's like, okay, this person's going to buy. They need this. They need this badly. They just said they need it really badly. Does that make sense? So they've said that, and then here's what you do. Sell the future. I think a lot of salespeople struggle with this. They don't sell the future. As the kids get older, it's going to get tougher. Then you got the ACT coming up in high school. If you're not good at that math, it gets rough. And you know how much college costs? And they're like, oh my gosh, right? And it's the same thing with real estate. It's like, you get this first house, and if it's the right one, because you have a really good realtor, guess what? In 5 years, it'll double. Because here's the statistic of how much it's growing every year, 9% or whatever it is in Knoxville, right? This is where you'll be in 5 years if nothing changes, right? Or you can have all these problems and you could maybe share a story of somebody, whatever, right? Does that kind of make sense? You're selling the future. If you sell the future and you get them to get the emotion, you're hitting the right pain points, they're ready to work with you because you get it. You got like a couch in their brain. Does that make sense? They're not having to tell you everything. You get it. So that's your 3 main reasons. Once you do the emotion, you're going to hit a couple objections if you know they're going to come. When someone comes into my office and they're a detective, before we ever get to money, you know what I know they're going to tell me? I got to think about it. I have a solution. Say, hey, listen, I know that, James, you're going to probably at the end of this be a slow decision maker. And they're like, yeah, I know you're probably going to ask a bunch of questions, want to know more. So at the end, I tell you, I have a solution. I have like a little trial period that I go on with people. And then I have like a lower package trial or something where we meet a couple times. And because they've then met and got value twice, they sign up for a longer period of time. So we have a solution. So I just mentioned, like, this is probably what I'm going to talk about. I'll show you everything because I know you want to know everything. But this is probably what we would go for. So that way they know and they don't see the price and just say no. Like, oh, there's a way to learn more. There's a process. Does that kind of make sense? Some can be, again, like the market things, the loan prices, the percentages, whatever it is. You're like, hey, I know right now the loans are really high in the market. There's not a lot of houses being sold and all that kind of stuff. And then you insert how you're going to solve that problem for them. But still, houses are selling. Here's the stats for the detective, for example, right? Or still, I sold 3 houses last month. Or here's the 2 people for the entertainer, right? The fighter. Here's 3 houses I sold. Here's the 2 people who bought with me last month. We're going to be okay, right? Does that kind of make sense? So that way they stop thinking that, and instead they just look at like, okay, the opportunity in the future. Does that make sense? Okay, that's where you put in those objections. All right, now, I want you to just write down, okay, we're taking 2 minutes here, exercise, not about what you know, about what you apply, right? I tell you all this stuff and then nobody uses it. That just upset me deeply, okay? So write down 2 to 3 objections that you've been getting recently, okay, that are really frustrating you. I'm going to teach you how to think about those and rewrite them a little bit. 2 to 3 objections, write them down. Whatever annoys you the most. I used to hate it when I was sitting down with the mom. I'd be like, hey, like, Karen, if you wanted to buy some books for the kids, help their education, would you be able to buy some without your husband here? And they'd be like, yes. And at the end, they would tell me, I need my husband. I'd be like, no, you said though. It really just means no, right? But there's a certain way to cover that objection to where it's very clear. I used to say, instead of what I said, which is very clear, hey, if you wanted to make a decision on this, something you could decide on without your husband, they'd always say yes. But sometimes you get to the end, they're like, oh, he's got the card. So when you say buy, for example, I get people to tell me, oh, no, he's got the card. I was like, oh, okay, I'll come back later. Leave in 6 minutes. And so you want to figure those types of things out, for example. Obviously, a little different in what you do. Hopefully, you'd have both spouses there, I'd assume, 90% of the time when you set up the meeting. So I bought my house, and again, this takes some educating, and this isn't the only way to answer this. But if it were me, and depending on who I was talking to, I would just explain, yeah, you buy now for this interest rate, but your value is going to go up at a higher rate than the interest rate, so you're actually making money, just so you know. And 2, the interest rate will come down at some point, you'll refinance, and you can change that later, for example. And I'm sure many people say things like this, but if you could show the numbers and explain it and basically guarantee that you're going to help them when all those things happen. I used to have people sign up to sell books, and it's their first time with a job on a 1099. Be like, how do we do taxes? I'd be like, here's how you do them, and I'll help you when we get there. And I would actually sit down and help these college students with their taxes because they wouldn't understand it. But that was sometimes an objection to not starting to sell books. And, I would just solve it. I would come up with does that make sense? And still, it's fear. So you've got to come with so much evidence that the fear is going to go away. You can't just say it now. You need to go pull up a graph of the last 20 years and show the interest rate. Hey, look, we're just here. It's coming down. So how can you basically get? Because we all get that in here as people who do this all the time, right? But they don't get it. So you got to be like 8th grade level and show them, right? And if you're thinking about this, and it's the only objection you're getting, what could you throw in the intro email, the warm-up email, maybe a YouTube video of either you or some professional explaining that interest rates, here's how you overcome it if you want to buy a house. They watch the video before they get in, they're like, wow, that was so helpful. I was really worried about the interest rates. Wow, thanks, James. I can't believe you put that together for me. No one does that. Does that make sense? So, we used to have a COVID objection. So we sold in 2020, that was my best year. We did $1 million sales of books, literally, that year. And everyone's like crazy, It was hard to recruit people after the COVID happened in 2020. I was in Michigan. It was wild. The next year, right, so we had a good year, right? So we all knew, wow, this is working great. Everybody's home, right? But then all these students were watching the news, just like everybody is in real estate right now, right? And they're like, terrified. Oh, what if I get the COVID? You know, people going to be like so rude to me and pull guns because the COVID, you know, they would say all these wild things. And what we did is we recorded a really good podcast that explained all the things that we did to make sure you were successful during COVID. Nothing bad happened. And in the email and the assignment, people would sign up for an interview. It was in their assignment. They had to listen to the podcast before they came to the meeting. And a lot of people didn't do that, and they would get the COVID objection, and I would never get it. They would get it. Oh, there's a process. Cool. They got it. They're not haphazard. It's trust. It's really just trust. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. Intro. So warm up email. Throw something in there. Put it in your presentation in the intro. Okay. The buying atmosphere. This is where people really struggle. This is really awkward for most people. Okay. It really is, because you're asking people to make a decision. And it just makes you feel weird. But it's really about how you ask. It's not about what you're saying. And how you ask is everything, okay? And this really does make a big difference. It helps you increase your closing percentage from whatever it is, like add 10%, add 20%, you know. It's a massive deal just asking for the sale or asking for a decision at the end. So what makes a really good buying atmosphere is two things. Hey, if you want to get this, if you want to work with me, awesome. I can show you how to get started with me like my other 500 people I've worked with. That's great. But hey, you know what? If the end of this, you know, you're not feeling it, it's not for you, just tell me no. It's not going to hurt my feelings at all. Not going to hurt my feelings at all. Only favor is, if I'm asking, you know, I work really hard and you work really hard and we're busy all the time and we've spent the time here today to like look at this. So if you don't mind taking a really good look, everyone's super nice about this. They take a really good look, and at the end, they're usually really sweet, and they just let me know one way or the other if it makes sense to work together. They usually just hit me one way or the other. Is that fair enough with you? And when you say it's that fair enough with you, they're like, oh, sure. Oh, sure. Especially if they've liked your intro. It's sort of like a litmus test, right? Does that make sense? If they say no here, probably gonna say no at the end. Like, I'll think. It just means your intro wasn't good enough. Does that make sense? Okay. But if they're that connected to you, they told you their pain points, they've gotten to this point where they're really excited about you, you've solved their problems, you've explained what's going to happen, they're ready to rock and roll, say, yes, I'll give you a decision, because they're expecting to say yes. When they agree to that, they're expecting to say yes. Most of the time. There's still going to be no's. There's still going to be no's. You're still going to have people tell you no. That's okay. But that's the idea of what you should be thinking. Okay? Again, some people do take more than one meeting. The detective or counselor may say, well, actually, you know, I'm making a decision by Friday. If they are, that's okay. You'll need to follow up with them between now and Friday. If you can get the detective or the counselor say, I will make a decision by Friday, they always make a decision by Friday. They always do, if they're actually a detective and a counselor. If a fighter says, I'll make a decision by Friday, that's just a no. Okay. He's just trying to be nice. Does that make sense? That's how you can tell. And I would suggest follow-up emails and stuff, but we're not going to cover that today. So, okay. Big concept in sales, again, I think most people understand, is this thing called the buying line. Okay. This is essentially the emotional level, right? If you're above a certain level, someone will buy with you. They will work with you, whether it's a product, service, or the sale of you as the realtor, okay? They've got to be above the buying line in order to do this, right? Like if you think of the reason we go get Chick-fil-A or we don't, it's just if we feel like it or not, right? It's the same reason we either feel like we should go ahead with this person or we feel like we don't. It's emotions, okay? So we want to get people above the buying line. And so what the intro does is it gets people from kind of over here indifferent to, wow, I'm really excited. And the demo pushes them above the buying line. This next step we're about to go through pushes them above the buying line. But people don't stay there forever, okay? They come down. You ever been in a sales meeting and they talk forever? And by the end of it, you're exhausted. You know, and you're like, oh my gosh, this was so long. You were above the buying line, and then you came down. It's like a sugar crash, okay? So your prospect's going to sugar crash like a 5-year-old, okay? So you've only got so much time. So you want to get to the close, the decision as fast as possible, okay? That way, when they're above the buying line, they're like, yes, this is great. This all makes sense. And the reason they come down, okay, it's no slimy sales trick. It's just so they forget stuff. So in the demo, this is the shortest part. The actual PowerPoint or like going through your process should take no more than like 3 minutes. Why? It instills confidence that you know what you're doing, even if they don't like get it. We used to have this big book, 2,000 pages was our sample book or something, and I would show 3 pages to sell 6 books. Because they don't need to see everything, they just need to get the idea of it and how it's going to solve their problem. So it's like, okay, I'm going to show you how this works. You know, I'm going to walk through every step. of the way. Again, if you like this, great. If not, fine. So we go through. All right, after that, like, okay, so here's my PowerPoint. So here's what happens. Boom, boom, boom. And you're going to go through your entire process. We help the whole process from the buyer from here to here. You give a little overview, and then you go through every single point. Little overview, go through every single point. Maria, how you were saying, like, man, it's so frustrating when the realtor doesn't get back to you. Well, I've got 2 people on staff, or I'm like, does that make sense? You're connecting it to the intro. You're connecting it to those pain points throughout the demo. Okay, does that make sense? Everyone's little demo is going to be a little bit different. Some will be longer, shorter than others. But again, under 3 minutes, explaining the exact process step by step. People don't know what's going to happen, then they feel like you're just fluffing them, right? You need proof. The whole point is to prove it. So I do it is we have a 6-month little calendar thing that we go through everything that's going to happen for 6 months. And they're like, oh, sweet, I get it. I get it. This is awesome. And I go through, like, as we build, here's all the other things we'll take care of you at those points. So that way you understand that there's at least a place to go for your logo and your website and your videos and your editing and whatever. But it's quick. Demo's too long, they will sugar crash. Don't want that. Okay. I think people struggle here too, especially entertainers and counselors. They struggle with justifying their value. Okay, so if you struggle for asking for 2 or 3 or whatever % you normally ask for, this is probably where you're struggling, proving your worth to someone essentially, which is kind of weird when you're talking about selling yourself, right? It's like product, so I could sell that chair, I could haggle over that, but over me, sometimes we feel a little bit weird about this, and we feel like, oh, if I ask too much, this is going to be weird on the relationship, whatever it is, right? So the way that you help people see the value, be excited to pay you, okay, is through this thing called a summary, trial close, and a price buildup. Okay, in those order. So summary is a reminder of all the value. You just went through everything that you do, right? Which is great, but now you need to summarize it because they already forgot the first slide. People have short attention spans. They just we'd go through whatever, and at the end I'd be like, yeah, so literally everything included is 36 subjects from 2nd and 3rd grade, or wherever they were at, depending on the package, right? 2nd or 3rd grade to 12th, all in one. Everything right there works the exact same way with math, 5,000 plus examples, all in the palm of your hand on your phone, tablet, or computer with the apps and websites that work with it. So that way you guys can save some time when you're busy with baseball and blah, blah, blah. And they'd be like, oh, sweet, so it's got all those subjects, right? And they're like, yeah. You're like, as you say that, they're reminded of the value, right? The big picture, everything they're getting, solving all of their problems, right? And you say, what'd you like about it? What'd you like about it? What's your favorite thing? And the goal in psychology is to get 3 yeses, okay? They say, yes, I love this about it, I love this about it, I love this about it. That means they're pretty much ready to close, okay? If someone says yes 3 times, they're likely to say yes a 4th time. So that's what the trial close questions do. Hey, Karen, did you like how I'm going to be there every single step of the way, or do you like how I have a team, all working to help you be successful? And they're like, that's called a choice of 2 positives. They can't give you a wrong answer. Well, Karen, I like this about it. No, I love your team aspect. That's really cool. Most people don't have a team. Does that kind of make sense? So come up with 3 questions based on your demo, right? 3 questions based on your demo that you're going to ask pretty much every time. You just go to see what they like. It also tells you if your presentation's good or not. If they don't like certain things, or you offer a couple things and they never say anything about one of them, you either change it, reword it, whatever. But getting this feedback from them is very helpful to improve as well. Okay, say 3 yeses. You're like, wow, this is awesome. So you've summarized all the things you do. There's yes. Like, okay, cool. Well, I'll tell you what, you're probably wondering, like, how much this costs is usually for the product or service, right? Or like, okay, well, I need to cover this commission thing with you, right? Right? We got to transition to the money now. Oh boy, and this right here, there's going to be a dip in the sugar rush. Okay, the buying line, we're going to have a dip. We got to get them back over the dip in this price buildup. This is the whole point of it, okay? So they see the price, we all get this thing called sticker shock. You heard sticker shock? See a car like, wow, this is amazing. They $40,000, you turn away. I'm good. Next one, right? Next one, please. Anything but that. That's way out of my budget. When you talk price, you get price. When you talk value, you get value. Okay? So your transition is like, I know this is an investment, right? You should be talking about yourself as an investment. Okay? Whether they're an investor or a first-time home buyer, whatever it is, you're an investment in their future, because by working with someone who will avoid mistakes, right, they're going to save money, and you need to explain why. Instead of buying a house and skipping some things and then discovering 6 or 12 or whatever, I know there's some legal things that you have to avoid saying, right? You can't make guarantees or whatever, but coming up with like where the value is long term. Because again, we sold the future at the beginning. We need to connect to the future now. Having someone in your network, whatever it is, you got to come up with your things there. I would say, like, Coaching is an investment because I help you make money. That's my goal. You're going to get a return on your investment, right? When you invest in your business, you get more out of your business. And I always compare to another company. This guy Simon Sinek charges $4,900, for 4 hours of his time. I'm like, man, you know what? When you first hear that, that's a lot of money, right? But he teaches you how to figure out your purpose in life. And if you figure out your purpose in life, aren't you more motivated? And they're like, yeah, okay. Well, if you're more motivated, aren't you probably going to make more money in your lifetime? They're like, yeah. It's like, let's just say you made 20 grand an extra, 20 grand every year just because you're motivated and have more work ethic because you know your purpose. What's 5 grand now? Does that make sense? What's the 2 or 3% now if you're set up, your house is sold in 30 days or 60, whatever, whatever their need is. And then you obviously say like, most people ask for this, I ask for this, whatever. You give me your 2.4. The common thing is 3%. And I ask 3% because here's what I do differently. And I would actually have a slide, okay, of the packages. I don't know if everyone does packages, but some people do 2, 3, or whatever percentages. And of like, here's what comes with each one. You can ask for a 3.5 or 4% if you're offering enough value to what they're going to get. Sell it in 30 days because you're going to do all of this extra marketing. I don't know. You can come up with whatever you want for your business, right? The idea is have it really clean, really clear of why it's worth it and what they get listed out, if at all possible, for giving you that 3%. If it's really clear, it's what they want, it's connected to their pain points, people won't bat an eyelash. They may ask a couple questions to confirm, right? They may have some objections that we'll talk about in a second. But if you can show the math and why it's worth it, it'll be good. Okay, bring it back to their future goals, okay? All right, so the close. You've done this, you've mentioned your 3% or 2% or whatever you're asking, right? And you're getting to the point where it's time to close them, okay? If you do not ask for the contract, I know there's a million different thought processes about, hey, should I have a contract? Is that weird or not? I promise you it's not weird, okay? In fact, it's very respectful, okay, to ask for that. And I think it makes everything super clear. And I'll walk you through how I would ask for that and get around it because, someone not signing it, if they're going to work with you and then trying to, it's almost like an abusive relationship in my opinion. If it's not abusive, but hey, you could do all this work for me, but I'm not promising to work with you. I don't know. If you're showing enough value here, they should be able to, if you can explain it, they should say yes if they're going to work with you. And if they're not, they'll tell you no, which is, again, you're not driving around 4 hours, these houses, and then going with somebody else, which actually to me is a net benefit. But we're afraid of no's, I think, sometimes. In fact, I like no's. No's are great. I like you telling me no in the first 3 minutes versus the last 3 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Let's get the no first. Let's just get more no's. Sometimes when I don't want a phone, I'm like, I'm just going to go get 20 no's and feel good. Because who cares? Who cares? There's millions of people in the world, billions of people. Plenty of people to talk to. You don't got to get a yes every time. I think if we just let go of it, because I think that's where it comes from. It's like, oh, we need to get the yes. And it's like, But if you didn't spend the 4 hours on them, couldn't you have called people for 4 hours? See what I'm saying? It's emotional. It's emotional. You got to get over that. You got to get over it. You got to get over it. I think you need to have a contract, okay? So 3 parts of the close, right? It's like why people like working with me. Here's 1 to 3 reasons people like working with me. They like working with me because I'm a concierge service. We make it happen. Whatever it is, we make it happen. Like for one of my clients, we've been coaching, we've been doing some Zooms. She's been struggling with implementation, so I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to change. I'm going to come to your team meeting next week. I'm going to meet with your COO tomorrow, and we're going to go solve a bunch of problems and implement it because you're a little bit like this, and that's okay, and I'm going to go fix it for you. And we do that because I let them know I'm concierge type service, right? And people are like, yes, that's amazing. Wow, we'll change things based on me. It's like, yes, we will change. Vernon's one of my clients in here, and we were doing a bunch of stuff on Google Drive and all this stuff, typing online, and he's a younger guy, so he, really likes paper. And so, what we did the next meeting is says, okay, we're changing everything, and I just brought a bunch of big sheets of paper, and we got more accomplished on 1 sheet of paper than we did through all the technology type stuff. Does that make sense? So we just change it. So people love that, right? Maybe a second one's like, I never cancel meetings. It's like, okay, sweet, you're rocking my schedule. You're allowed to reschedule with me, but I'm not going to, if I schedule with me, we're going to do the meeting, for example. So you got to come up with your 3 value points of what people love working with you about, make it very clear, and then explain the next steps. And then, if we were to sign up together, if we start working together, here's what happens. We do a boom, boom, whether it's a stage the house or whatever little things you do based on the packages, right? Here's the next steps. We going to take a bunch of pictures. I actually schedule everything. You pay nothing because they don't know that sometimes. They don't know that they're not paying anything, right? They're just paying you at the end, right? Does that make sense? boom, what are the next steps? What happens? So what's going to happen? We're going to meet. We're going to go over. We're going to get the listing thing. I'm going to send you all these emails. And then we're going to follow up. And then this is going to happen. And then boom, once we get an offer, all the paperwork is the fun stuff. That stuff I take care of for you, so you don't have to worry about it. And they're like, oh, sweet. Okay. Does that kind of make sense? To understand? And then your transition is like, yeah, and so all we need to move forward with that is this. And if you have a paper or whatever, sometimes paper is really nice in this scenario because it's just like, pass it over there or pass the computer, I guess, whatever you're doing. All we need to do is just fill out this little contract saying that we're working together. And the reason I do that is so that way I can give you the best service possible. That's the line. The reason I have this is so I can give you the best service possible. Because if I know we're working together, aren't I going to work harder? And then Karen goes like, yeah, that makes total sense. Like, that's why I do it. And they're like, okay. Does that make sense? You just got to sell it. Because you are going to work harder if you know they're working with you, right? Aren't you going to like make it happen? Absolutely. Let them know that you're going to make it happen. All right, so we have some objections in the close. They're different than covering them in the intro. Now, the answer to every objection is almost better covered in the intro, right? What we talked about a little while ago. But we get one here. It's because we didn't think of it, or we didn't know, or they didn't tell us something, which is fine. It happens. So you get objection here, you got to be delicate, okay? Because if you get into an argument, sales lost. It's just over, okay? If there's any sort of negative emotion, the buying line goes, phew, trust goes out the window, okay? So we don't want that. So we want to keep them above the buying line, and we want to solve their problem, okay? An objection, again, it just means, based on the information I have, I can't say yes yet. Underline, highlight, yet, okay? There's a way to close someone if they've gotten to the point at the end, okay, I promise. I had a lady come follow me one time from California. She had a whole sales group. She came and followed me one day. I remember doing this sale. And there was, about 5 or 6 objections at the end. I was like, okay, well, you guys really like it though, right? And they're like, yeah. It's just like asking the question to make sure they like it. You guys really, okay. So like, what are you struggling with? It's like, well, we don't know if you'd use it. Okay, no worries, totally get that. Well, I'll tell you what these people did, I went and did push-ups, They just talked as a family. I walked away for 2 seconds, so you just discuss it. And y'all just decide one way or the other, no big deal. And if it's a no, I'll just catch the next one, not a big deal. But y'all just talk, because I know might be weird with me here. And just ask Billy. Billy, just be honest, not gonna hurt my feelings. And I'd run away and do some push-ups. And I'd come back and they'd be like, Billy said he wants it. And you know what the problem was, right? They felt like Billy was saying it because I was there. I knew that, so I got out of the way. And they bought it. And she's like, oh my gosh, like, how you're handling these objections? This is crazy, I would have just left. It's like, well, give them the option, to just talk it over. Does that make sense? So every objection has some sort of answer, right? That took me a couple years to figure out, So dude, I used to do this thing called the bathroom close, same concept. Hey, I gotta run to the restroom. Y'all just talk it over and let me know. Especially if they're on the fence. And I'm like looking at my watch and I'm like, man, I've been here a while. I'm ready to leave. I don't care. Like, just going to the next one's more valuable to me, right? And we want to get in that mindset. I would just go to the bathroom, come back, and have an answer. And a lot of times they buy a bigger one because, the son or the daughter was like, Dad, I need it, Dad. And the fact that I'm not there, then the dad's just like, okay, all right, we'll do it, whatever, right? Dad just wants to do the right decision, or mom. So that's what you're doing, right? You're asking this trial close. Are you sure you want this? Like, do you really like this? Like, working together would be pretty cool. If they say no, then, there you go. They're telling you no. Okay. But they say, yeah, no, I'd really like to work with you. Like, okay. So is it really just like more of a price thing? I would often ask this clarifying question, more of a price thing, or is it more of like, would you use it? Or again, you'll change this. Is it more of like the process? Is it more the timing, figuring out what it is? Is it more of the commission price, right? All those types of things. They're going to tell you what it is when you clarify that. Because if you don't, people don't say what they mean, they don't mean what they say, right? They're just saying a bunch of other stuff because they don't want to hurt your feelings or something. But if is it one of these 3 things? Is it me? It's more a personality thing. You can ask all those questions and they'll tell you what it is. No worries, totally understand. And when you acknowledge that they've said it by saying these things, I get that, and you relate, actually a few people who I've worked with have said the same thing. Names, if you have your names list, right? When you have your names list, you can bring up some stories, right? Yes? And then you're like, here's the solution that we came up with. Whether it's the shorter trial version for the detective and coaching business, or it's here's actually how we help you overcome that so you don't feel that way. Remember, it's always fear. They're always just afraid of something, a negative outcome, and you're just trying to help them show that they won't get a negative outcome. Whether that's a smaller commitment up front, and then you have a process for 2 more meetings to help them get them over the edge, or whatever, or then you give them a pro forma to help them get them over the edge, whatever it is. You just want to have this prepared, okay? All right, and then you reclose, right? Tell them, like, hey, totally get how you feel. This is how we help. Here are the different things. Remember, it's just the same process. I'm still going to be doing all this stuff for you. I'm going to add that in to help you. All we need is kind of this little piece of paper right here. If they obviously were receptive to what you're saying, I wouldn't reclose if they're like, yeah, or anything like that. You don't want to be coming off like a weirdo or trying to be pushy or something. It's always based on working together would be cool. If they say very much yes and they're excited, they're just missing some piece of information. Okay, and obviously schedule the next meeting. Whatever you do after, you get the contract. Again, different for everybody, so we're not going to go a bunch into that process and all that kind of stuff. Again, that would be another big meeting because we're already getting at hour and 20 minutes here. So before they walk out the door, okay, I think people skip this because they get excited. I'd have rookies just, woohoo, got a sale, and they'd run out there, and then they'd get out there and be like, oh man, where do I go next, right? So they wouldn't ask for referrals. So, okay, at the point of where you get the contract, just write this down. You should always be asking for referrals. If they decide to work with you, they're excited. So always ask for referrals. And then you also want to solidify, okay? And the order I would do is solidification, and then ask for referrals because they're kind of excited about you and what you're doing. So solidification is just leaving the house, leaving the prospect, leaving the sales meeting, whatever it is, right? The listing, buyer's presentation, with them remembering why they're excited to work with you versus, oh, I'm giving away 3%. Because if we leave and they think, oh, okay, 3% is all I got out of this is I'm just paying them, what are they going to do? They're going to have this thing called buyer's remorse, and they're going to call you. Can I, change this? Or they ghost your texts or something or whatever, right? That happens. And so what we want to do is like, hey, what's the biggest reason you're working with me today? Like, why'd you decide this? I always ask because I make a Facebook post. That's always my excuse. And I do make a Facebook post, and I put it in there. I always ask for my Facebook post. What's the biggest reason you did this? And then they stop for a second. They remember the future. Remember what you sold at the intro? Remember what you proved in the demo? Remember what you talked about, what we call the price buildup? Right? It's the future. You know what? I just know that you're going to get me where I want to go, and you seem to really care, and et cetera, what they're going to say. It's usually emotional. You're like, oh, sweet. And you're writing that down. Like, sweet, now it's the best part ever. You ready? Facebook time. Woo! You take a picture, and you post it online with that description. You have them share it, if at all possible, so that way their friends see that they're working with you and they trust you, right? And that's a little marketing right there for you. When you do that, they're going to feel really good. Most of the time, they're not going to cancel. I have a very low cancellation rate on door-to-door sales. Again, like 2 or 3%, maybe. Knocking, leaving 20 minutes, all that kind of stuff. So this really does work.
All right, before we jump into exactly how to approach and get better at this to increase your conversion, talk about the mindset. Because if you're in sales, if you're an entrepreneur, you know that mindset's everything. And if you don't get this piece, the rest of the video doesn't matter. You've got to buy in that approaching is an art form. It's this process, this puzzle that you can eventually figure out. And the only reason you're maybe not great at it or don't have a high conversion rate right now is simply because you don't know how. It's a knowledge gap. And the secret to becoming a great approacher is to start thinking like your prospect. Get into their mind. What do they care about? What do they want? And how do they want to be treated? And you need to start tailoring your approach to your ideal prospect that you want to talk to. And if you don't know the answer to those questions, just ask. Ask your prospects. Ask them what they care about. You'll be surprised what they tell you, and you can improve your approach. So number one is body language. Whether you're phoning or you're in person, it's just as important that you smile, you have eye contact, that you're enthusiastic with your mannerisms, because you can tell the difference if I'm sitting like this and really lethargic and it doesn't sound like I'm interesting, that I'm worth your time. You can also tell if you're nervous, really don't know what you're talking about, and you're and that also doesn't sound like you're worth my time, versus someone being confident, smiling, and having energy through the phone. And your body language directly relates to tip number 2, which is your tone. Okay, if your tone isn't low and slow, you're doing it wrong. I mean, if you're talking way too fast, blah, 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 your cadence is just way off and yada, yada. Again, or if you sound nervous or just really uninterested, or you're distracted, why would anyone want to spend time with you if they don't feel like they're your number one priority? If you're struggling with tone, just ask yourself, are you afraid of them hanging up? Are you afraid of a no? You've got to be comfortable with no's. No's are good. No's just get you closer to the yeses. It doesn't matter. Relax, slow down, because it's also the opposite of what they're expecting a salesperson to do, because bad salespeople talk as fast as humanly possible. They don't care about their prospect, which all comes through with your tone and your body language. All right, number 3, be funny, make money. Ask yourself, do you make your prospect chuckle every single approach in the first 5 seconds? If you don't, you need to figure out how to make people laugh and be different. I'll give you one tip of exactly how I train everybody on my team and all the clients is look somebody up before you call them and get their first, last name and their title, get a little bit of information. And when you call, is this the Joe Ignace? And because it's so different, they're engaged in 5 seconds. They're probably chuckling. You're like, oh, it is the Joe Ignace. And then you now have an open conversation. They're not going to hang up on you. And this leads into tip number 4, be different. What is every single prospect thinking you're going to do? Because there's so many bad salespeople out there just like hitting the numbers, going after it, not worrying about their conversion. And they're all just making these terrible mistakes where they're going too fast, they're doing whatever. So how can you be different with your prospect? The Joe Ignace is one way. Making them smile. Going slow is the opposite of what most salespeople do. And it makes you different, makes you intriguing, and it makes them feel like they're being respected. All right, number 5, be clear. Does your prospect understand the value for them within the first 10 seconds of your approach? If they're not getting that, you're not being clear and you're not being concise, and they don't understand why they should continue talking to you. So get the value, get to the point quicker after you've made them laugh and they understand the value. They're much more likely to talk to you more to learn more about exactly what you are doing. If you're somebody who enjoys this type of content, you would absolutely love our conference. It's called Best Year Yet Conference, and we have one every single year in January to help entrepreneurs and salespeople kick off their years to have their best year yet. We believe that every year should be your best year yet, so we line up speakers and bring you resources to help you guys start the year right. If you want to learn more about the conference, just go to the link in the description under conference. And now back to the video. All right, so number 6, share past client successes. So ask yourself, like in every approach, are you mentioning other companies or individuals that the prospect would know to build credibility that what you do isn't some random thing out of the blue, sounds like a scam, and rather you're credible. You work with a lot of companies they've heard of or a lot of individuals they've heard of. So that way they're much more likely to book a meeting with you because your past success leads to your future success. And it takes extra time, but if you're going low and slow, you've made them laugh, they already understand the value, they're going to listen to that and be much more interested in what you're doing. So number 7, set a buying atmosphere. Ask yourself, do you let your prospect know that they won't be sold super hard if they book a meeting with you? You let them know that you're okay with either a yes or a no, and it's no big deal either way, and you're just trying to find the right people and learn more about their needs to see if you can help them reach their goals. And number 8, to finish off the basics of approaching, ask for the meeting and not for the sale. The reason you're doing this is if you ask for the sale too early and you haven't built up any value and give them some sort of price, they go ahead and just tell you no, and you have no opportunity to really help them understand how your product or service will improve their business or their life, depending on whatever the heck it is you're selling. All right, before we jump into the advanced stuff, if you're getting a lot out of this video, if you're serious about increasing your conversion rate with your approaching, we need to talk. So just go to the link in the description and book a meeting or tell us more about your business so we can talk with you. All right, for the moment you've all been waiting for, the advanced approaching section. Here we go. All right, number 1 for the advanced. This is tough to do for most people and most people skip it, but it's going to increase your conversion rate by like 10, 20, 30%, is get pre-approach about your prospect. So slow down in your process of calling the next number, okay, and look them up. Add them on LinkedIn, look them up on Facebook. Find things that are relatable about their experience and talking points that aren't just, can I sell you as fast as possible? And figure out if they would know about any of your past clients. So when you call, you can mention the right past clients that you've worked with. You can ask them questions. You can talk about how you've been looking them up and appreciate their experience or their take on certain topics. Your approach can be 10 times more likely to get into a good conversation. And once you've built good rapport with people and you have trust, now you're just trying to figure out if they have a need. But if you have trust, they'll book a meeting. And at the meeting, you can figure out the need and actually close on really solid business. Don't treat the prospect like a number, but rather a person. All right, second advanced tip that most people don't do because it's uncomfortable and you have to get good at redirecting and being politely persistent, but you should always second approach. Let me give you a story. In Kanawha, Oklahoma, I'm 19 years old. I'm learning this approach thing, doing door-to-door sales, and I pull up, I'm training somebody to sell books door-to-door, and I pull up in this long driveway, and there's this really nice mom. We sold educational books, and she's watering her garden. And as I'm pulling up, I'm waving, and I used to honk the horn so that way they would know I was coming, wouldn't get startled, and I'd always laugh as I'm going up the driveway, so I get in a good mood.
She's just so funny. And I went up and I got out and I ran over there and gave her a high five and started my approach. And the first approach, she's like, oh, I think my sister bought from you. I don't think we're interested. And what's happening in my brain from this puzzle is like, if your sister bought, you should be interested. That's confusing. Let me back up. And I did this thing called a second approach where you're just like, oh, no worries. I guess you haven't heard about me yet. Or, oh, cool. How do you know the sister? What'd she get? You know, just jogging the memory, trying to understand what's going on in her brain. So is it really a no? Or is it more of, based on what I see, it's a no. Turned out I went through a second, a third, a fourth approach, a fifth approach, sort of laughing with her. We're having a good time. It's no pressure. It's no big deal. And it turns out her kids are in middle school and her sister has little kids and they bought little kid product or service. So I pivoted. I was like, oh, well, you have middle schoolers. You're more like these people. I showed her some different past clients. And then she sat down with me and 15 minutes, she bought a $900 package. And it was awesome. And that's why you always second approach, because you don't know what they're thinking. They might be making an assumption about a product or service that somebody else bought that maybe they heard of or whatever, or they've seen something online about your company and they don't really understand what you do. So the second approach helps you back up, say, oh, no worries. I completely understand why you'd think that. Let me back up. Again, my name is, and this is what we're doing based on your situation, because you guys have more like this situation. And that person can connect the dots and say, oh, right. Yeah, I'm more like that. That does sound interesting. And you can get the meeting. The big point, don't give up on the first no. Just understand that they're confused and they're making some assumptions. Try to understand those assumptions and give them more information to see if you can actually get a meeting with the person. Okay, but last but not least, for advanced tip number 3 is follow up consistently. Ask yourself, do you actually believe that if you follow up with someone that they will convert? Okay. One of the biggest clients we've ever converted at Knowledge Gap Company to this day was through 6 months of follow up after we booked a meeting. And it basically was slow email traffic. And after 6 months, we moved forward and now they're our largest client. And so when you approach people, don't just approach them one time, on the phone or do that second approach when you're actually talking. Continue to approach, continue to push forward, especially if you believe you can help them and there was interest in the initial meeting. And just remember, approaching is an art, right? It's a puzzle. You have to believe that you can get your conversion to be much higher. You can't just say, well, it's the leads I'm getting. You can't just say, oh, it's the data. I don't have access to this. It's like you have to open up your mind to figuring out a better way to approach if you want your conversion to increase. Otherwise, everything on this video doesn't matter. So change your mindset. Know that your conversion can get better if you can develop the right resources and change the way that you approach people to think about what they care about and help them understand the value faster. If you enjoyed this video, guys, like and subscribe. I make these videos every single week on tips to grow your business, increase your sales, conversion, revenue, all that kind of stuff. So appreciate you watching the video. Please comment with your thoughts below.
I guarantee if you fix these mistakes, you will get more meetings booked and more sales because of it. All right, mistake number 1, your approach is way too complicated. So you're calling and you're talking about a bunch of stuff that they don't care about, or you're just not delivering your value proposition fast enough. Simplify your approach. Tell them who you are, what you're doing, how long this should take, why they should care, and then ask for the meeting, and that's all you need to be doing. If you're doing anything else, you're confusing them or giving them some reason they shouldn't buy from you, okay? Sell the idea, ask for a meeting. If they have a question, they're confused, that means they're interested. It doesn't mean they're saying no. So back up, support the general idea of why people work with you with some more information, a couple quick client testimonial or names, and then ask for the meeting again. The answer to every objection is simply asking for the meeting where you can cover everything they want in more detail, and that's why they should come to the meeting in the first place. So this would be a bad approach if you just lead with price and don't really explain things and don't ask for a meeting. So you're calling, you say, hey, is this blank? And they say, yes. You're like, great, I am calling to sell you this thing, and here is the price. Are you interested? That would be a terrible approach, okay? They do not have enough value from you or information to know if they should buy or not. A better approach would be like, hey, is this the Gavin McGee? Perfect, I've got the right person. My name's Joe, I work at this company. Reason I'm reaching out is we've been working with a ton of awesome people in blank space, whatever industry you're in, and we've been helping them accomplish blank result that is valuable to them. I'd love to sit down with you on a quick Google Meet to go over some details to see if we might be able to help you get this same result. Would you be open-minded to jumping on a call? And they say yes, or they're gonna say no. If they say no, then you're gonna go through and say, hey, no worries, totally get it. You probably not heard about us before. well, let me back up. I'm Joe, and I'm from here, and you give them a little bit more information. We've worked with like these 5 clients, and we're able to do this with them. It's nothing you have to do at all, but I'd love to jump on a call if you'd be open-minded to that. And then they say yes, and then you're booking the meeting. So get more to the point, sell the credibility, right? Sell the points, and then get to the meeting. So mistake number 2 that you might be doing is not confirming the date, time, and location of the meeting while you have the person on the phone. Okay, you've done the hard part, you've gotten them to like you, and they've said, yes, I'd love to jump on a call. And then you say, perfect, I'll email you some times, and you hang up. That would be the complete opposite of what I'm going for here. Instead, say, perfect, what's a good day or time for you? I've got Thursday, Friday open this week. Which of those days are better? You give them a choice of 2 positives, and they say Thursday or they say Friday. You're like, perfect, morning or afternoon, what's better for you? And they say morning. You're like, awesome, how's 9 o'clock sound? And they say 9 o'clock sounds great. And what you do is you put them on speaker, or you have your computer, and then you go ahead and pull up your Google Calendar. If you don't do this, get Google Calendar, super helpful. Pull up your Google Calendar and go ahead and say, what's your email so I can send you the event invite? Once you get their email, you throw it in there, it automatically sends an event invite, right? And then you're gonna say, what's the best place to meet? Now, most of the time we do Google Meet, or if they're nearby in your industry, I can meet you in person near wherever. You go ahead and just put the location in there. They have everything sent to them. And then a bonus tip right here that most people don't do is setting expectations for what will happen next. Mention that you're gonna send them a quick email, which is part of the next point here, and go ahead and say, I'm really excited to see you then. Everything good? And then you hang up the call. So while at the end of the call, you now have a booked meeting, location, time, everything's figured out, and they know what to expect from you, and you know what to expect from them, and the meeting will actually happen. So you've done all of that, and then we run into mistake number 3, showing up to that meeting without any nurture beforehand. So the reason you don't want to do this is it leads to a longer sales cycle, or a confused prospect, or it wastes your time by setting up the meeting, and they're not ready to be closed on that meeting. So what you need to do, and I just mentioned this a second ago, is send an introduction email prior to the meeting that you booked on the call. So this intro email is different for every business, but the basic idea is you want them to have enough information beforehand to be interested, understand what you do, the value that your company is going to bring to them, and answer some of the technical questions, safety questions, whatever it is in your industry that they need to know to have less objections. And so that way, when you come to the meeting, they know your purpose or the mission of the business, they know all of that stuff, and they can actually just start asking about how to purchase and get walked through the steps of working with your company to achieve whatever the end result is in your business. Whenever you're approaching leads, right, keep your approach simple, ask for meetings, and don't get bogged down on that first phone call by going into too much detail, okay? Book the meeting while you're on the call. Do not hang up until you have a Google Calendar meeting time, date, location, and everything sent over to the possible prospect. And then before you go to that meeting, make sure you send them an intro email that has more information about your company so they can be sold on you, have credibility already established, trust you more, and know why the product or service that you're selling will help them to limit the amount of confusion and extra time needed to educate your prospect on the value of what you're selling.